Okay, so we're going to carry on our discussion of the Parami. I'm aware of the fact we've missed a meeting. Therefore, we've got more Parami than weeks left. So we're going to have to do a couple of Parami each week. We get together now in order to go through them all. But I think even now, the purpose is served because we're all a lot more aware, hopefully, of the power of acting compassionately and being of service, acting with generosity and kindness, which essentially is what the Parami are. It's just typical of the Buddha's teaching in the Theravadan tradition. We go for lists, and we're able to expand on the subject a little bit more. So today we just need to briefly recap the wisdom Parami, which we covered the last time we met. And then we can look at the energy and patience Parami. One observation, I'll ask you for your anecdotes and any observations that you have. One thing that strikes me is that to remember that what we are dealing with are very pragmatic, everyday occurrences. We do fulfill the Parami. Perhaps we just simply don't do it as consciously and have as much of a sort of meta overview of what we're doing. But people do. We wouldn't survive as a species if people didn't perform these or similar types of actions. So we see there is a lot of compassion in the world. There is a lot of service to others. So looking at the wisdom Parami, like what can we draw from it? What can we recall what we sort of talked about the last time and how the wisdom aspect informs our behavior? So for me, like, you don't necessarily perform wisdom. You perform an act of kindness or an act of generosity or an act of service. What is the wisdom facet? If you think of it as a many-sided jewel, what would be the wisdom aspect of it? What is it that we need to consider and think about in order for there to be the wisdom aspect in an act of service? Or have I asked an impossible question? Peter, if you'd like to unmute, sir.
Hi, Paul.
Hello.
Nice I hope you're feeling a bit better.
Yeah, a bit.
Good.
No, I feel better. It still lingers, though. Oh, wow.
Yeah. There's always an echo of it, isn't there?
Yeah, I think a few files got deleted.
Right. Yeah. Yes. Good analogy. Wisdom. Yeah, I was just talking in the breakout room to Natalie, and the wisdom for me is I've got slightly better in the last few weeks of sort of fast forwarding the video in my head apropos of a consequence of an action or that I may make. And I suppose the wisdom aspect is knowing, in a mundane wisdom point of view, that there is a result of action. So I got slightly better at considering whether the action was worth making sometimes, and I was relating it particularly to myself and potential bike rage moments, as I suffer a bit as a cyclist with other people apparently not always seeing me or paying attention to the possible danger that they might be inflicting on me by the way they're driving.
Peter, this is turning into a bit of a soap opera. Did you get a new bicycle?
No, I didn't. A friend of mine lent me a bicycle.
Okay.
So
I've got the other one back yet.
No, the police are still trying to deal with it. I've done everything I can. I've sent them a photograph of the perpetrator, the apparent name, and where he's likely to be. Okay. But nothing's happened. So anyway, yeah, bike rage, and so I'm just restraining it because I know if I voice my There's a
Okay, this is really interesting because we're jumping ahead a little bit, but this is the patience parami, isn't it?
yeah,
Yeah.
there's a combination of
So
patience
what
and I suppose
so what is the wisdom aspect of employing patience?
that I'll suffer less potentially, I suppose. Because if I make an efficient action, I'm less likely to suffer than an inefficient action.
Okay, so that means to practice the patience, there must be the willingness to restrain acting on the rage, which means that you're preferring the suffering you currently have over the suffering you would consequently have if you acted on that rage.
Precisely, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. And so
yeah,
I choose the lesser of the suffering.
yeah. So that implies that on some level there is an understanding of the Four Noble Truths.
Yeah.
That suffering is actually the product of craving for things to be different than they are. Acting out of prior craving at some point in our long history has resulted in these kinds of resultants and these kinds of painful feelings and these kinds of unwanted perceptions. And if I act with resistance and clinging attachment now, then I'm going to produce more in the future. And so there is a willingness to essentially practice patience, which is the restraint of acting on impatience.
Mm.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Good.
Thank you.
So yeah, so starting to get into it now, warming up a little bit, remembering what wisdom actually is. So it's wisdom, it's like this meta level of appreciation of the kinds of actions that we're performing, a kind of recognition of how things work in this scheme of things. Yeah. So like another example I had, if I can bring it to mind. Yeah, so wisdom would be knowing, for instance, when to say and when not to say. And if there is mindfulness, say, of the other person, you've got something difficult to tell them, perhaps, and there is mindfulness of potentially their state of mind at this current time, you can determine whether now is an appropriate time to say or not to say. Yeah, so that's an example of wisdom. At some point you're going to have to say, and it's necessary, but you want the best possible supporting conditions to say it. And when somebody is angry, annoyed, fed up, irritable, that's not the time perhaps to say it. And perhaps there's another time when they're feeling more equanimous, perhaps, or tranquil, or even happy, where perhaps then broaching the subject might get a different kind of result. Yeah. So that's the wisdom aspect. It's having a bit of an overview, understanding how the world works, and making careful choices based on that. Does anybody have another aspect of the wisdom faculty that they've noticed that they'd like to talk about? Okay, there's a raise hand icon at the bottom of the screen, hopefully. It should be somewhere, which enables you to, well, I can't actually see mine. Linda, hello. If you'd like to unmute.
My question is a bit odd, I think. Yeah, I don't think it's. I've been reading Alan's book, Unfolding Wisdom, and I wanted to ask about right view. Is that all right?
By all means.
Right view. Pardon?
That's part of wisdom. So yeah.
Yeah. Right view. And he says that it's as much a feeling as thinking, which really threw me because I thought, oh, this is something, obviously in relation to the 3 marks of existence. But later on, he just talked about intellectual right view. And I was just wondering how we develop that, or because it's just been going round and round in my mind. And I thought I'll have to talk about it, even though I'm probably not expressing myself very well.
Well, from what you said, so we're talking about an intellectual appreciation of these things, which is necessary to have, but it's also recognizing the limitation of just the theory. The theory doesn't set you free.
Exactly.
Because if the theory just set us free, then all we'd have to do is read Alan's book.
Yeah.
So at least it's giving us the terminology. It's giving us the theory and the overarching principles as to why it is that we rest contented in the moment and explore conscious experience. And so it's a mixture of the theory and the practice, which some people call praxis, so with an X, and so it's the combination of the theory and the practice. So the theory informs and gives us the language to be able to apprehend and comprehend and label what is actually going on in our experience. And the more we practice, then the experiential takes over. So it's like repeatedly we start going, oh, that's exactly what I read in the books. Now I see it. So it is the actual mindful noting which leads to the clear comprehension, and therefore to transcending the mere intellectual appreciation of right view to the actual having right view. So right view essentially means you see it as it really is, as opposed to having previously where we saw it in a deluded way. Yeah. So we misperceive reality, and as a consequence, passionately wanted things to be different and consequently suffer. Yeah. Does that cover it for you?
Yes, yeah. I think that's what I was thinking anyway. And it's
so you've got two varieties of right view. You've got the mundane right view and the supramundane right view. The mundane right view is that our actions have results. There's a generous, the action of generosity yields wealth to whoever acts in that way. There is rebirth. Parents are worthy of the greatest respect for having this opportunity to follow the path. And there are teachers who can actually show us the way, explain things, and help guide us in the right direction. Yeah. So essentially the Parami, what we're doing with the Parami is mundane right view, because it's essentially saying, well, our actions have results, and we need to create the supporting condition favorable for meditation and developing supramundane insight and supramundane right view. So it all fits. There's nothing that exists outside of the book, that all the bits of the Buddha's teaching form a complete whole. Yeah. Good. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
Thanks, Linda.
Thank you.
So does anyone have anything else they'd like to talk about wisdom, or shall we introduce now Roland?
Yes.
Could you use not on this section because we started, but the raise hand icon would be helpful. Thank you.
Yes, I realize that, but it's disappeared from my computer as well. I can't raise a hand. That's why I had to do that.
Oh, I see.
So I do apologize. It's not on my.
It's under
Be.
React.
Is it? Okay. Oh well, that's it says clap. Right. Anyway, I'll do that.
Raise hand is at the bottom.
Okay. What I was going to just suggest is I was thinking about wisdom. From a medical point of view, we are always sworn to whatever you do, do no harm. But I think that really applies quite well in being wisdom in everyday life. Whatever decision you make, try not to obviously do physical harm, but whatever you do or say, think about it and think, will it cause mental harm or cause harm? So I link wisdom to what will be the result of doing something.
Yeah, now we have to be really careful here. We have to be really, really careful, because, and I wanted to bring up with Peter as well, it's like, are you sure you absolutely know what is required? Are you apt? Because we're not talking about the medical world, so they've got a certain amount of knowledge which backs up their, that they've got the theory to do what they do in terms of medicine, absolutely. But what we've got to be careful of is assuming that we know what's best for somebody else. We cannot assume to know what is harmless for the other person. That's, with the greatest respect, that is not how we do it. Because how do we know we're not projecting our own stuff?
Good point.
So the essential thing here is that we know our own minds, and we know whether we are acting with greed, hatred, or confusion in the mind. And if we are, we don't act. If we know that that's what's in our minds. So going back to the example of, like, well, you need to say something to this other person, and yes, you take into account whether they are receptive, in a receptive mode or not. But also you have to consider whether you yourself are placing your own passion and your own need for something to be resolved ahead of all of that. So the first port of call is know your own mind. Not know what, because we do not have power, these predictive powers. It's one of the illusions that we assume we know what's best for other people.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you. I can see that now, and I've found where to raise my hand for next time as well.
Excellent. So it's the react, is it? It's now called react. Yeah. React opens up. Oh, react
opens up a box. Yeah.
A whole bag of beautiful. I like the rocket. Feel free to send me a rocket sometime. Hilda, hello.
Hello.
Thank you, Roland. Hilda.
Hey, yeah, so I thought that was really interesting answer you just gave. I work part-time as a teacher in a school, middle school, and yeah, I've been thinking a lot about this, the wisdom aspect, because obviously the kids get into fights with each other all the time, like during class or during their break, and it's just interesting, like looking at my reaction to it, because obviously sometimes you have to step in, stop them hurting each other. But other times, like you say, we can't know what's harmless for someone else, but it's like, as well as an adult, you can't like stop every little fight that they have. It's also how they learn to, be humans. But it's super interesting, just like looking at what's going on inside of me, because sometimes I'll get really worked up from what they're doing, and other times it doesn't worry me so much, perhaps, even if they're being really mean to each other. So yeah, it's just that kind of balance of like, when I step in sometimes, it's like, am I actually angry, or like, yeah, it's super interesting to just be aware of, and very tricky knowing when to, how to react, or just being aware of what's going on.
So how much does reflection inform you?
Yeah, a lot. It's like, yeah, I spent a lot of time thinking about, could I have acted differently,
or should you have?
or should I have? Would that benefit the kids?
Or could you have?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
sometimes I try and stop them fighting, but it's really difficult. Like, they're determined to fight, like, actual fist fights sometimes, and it's their kids.
Yeah, kids are horrible, aren't they? No, they're not. There's a joke. Yes, because part of the reflective process is realizing we probably couldn't have behaved differently in that situation. But going forward, can I adapt? So we've always got to let ourselves off the hook. So another aspect of the Parami, and what you learn through developing the Parami, we have Alan and Jack, who are the founders of the center here, were very strong on impeccability, doing things in an impeccable way. But impeccability isn't doing everything absolutely perfectly, or the idea of perfection is a relative thing, which is it depends on how much time you've got. It depends on different supporting conditions as to how much you do, or whether you intervene or whether you don't. And so we've got to be able to play with this in a loose way, not be too tight and be concerned about getting it right every time. We've got to give ourselves the luxury of maybe making errors and going into the reflective mode and saying, okay, what state was I running? Bit of self-honesty. Yeah, I was a bit impatient there, or I was a bit angry there, or I just didn't like to see it, and then you can make a resolution about moving forward. So you go, okay, so that's why I'm probably feeling a bit rubbish right now with myself. And then you just say, okay, well, all right, well, that's when you let yourself off the hook. Because you're human, and part of the process of learning anything is making errors, and that's how we learn. And then you get better at things. Or you become more skillful in your relating, because you learn through bitter experience, through trial and error, when to say, when not to say, when to intervene, when not to intervene. Yeah. So, but we have to allow ourselves the luxury of being human.
Yeah, I think back sometimes as well, like things that happened with my friends when I was their age, I don't know, 10, 11 years old. And those things were actually really impactful on how I behave still today. Like in a good sense, I learned a lesson. So sometimes, I'm thinking, okay, well, they have to learn these lessons like the hard way.
Oh, I've discovered that recently. Yes. Kids don't appreciate that you've been on the planet a lot longer than them.
Yeah.
And so you offer your pearl of wisdom. It's like, that's not what I want to hear. That's not how it works. And they're, okay, well, you're going to have to find out your way then. Okay. Because that's what I did. There is a point where, as a child, it is your duty to stop listening to your parents. It's just the way it goes. So absolutely then. So okay, so we got this wisdom faculty, with the wisdom parami, which I think develops alongside all our intention to be of service and to be generous and to be thoughtful and kind and so forth. Now we've also got the energy parami. Energy. What does that kind of that word in the context of developing the parami? What is energy? How's it used? Peter?
I mean, I don't know if I'm right, but what I understand personally from the parami of energy is the restraining and removing of inefficient states of mind and the promoting and maintaining of efficient states of mind and actions.
Okay, so yeah, that's right effort as it's explained in the Noble Eightfold Path. So give us some practical examples. What do we mean by is there no end to the energy you can give to other people? Is it all about just expending every last drop of energy you have in order to save other people? Now, the sort of hyperbolic way I presented that question is probably suggestive that the answer is no. However, let's find out what you think. What do you think? What's the right amount of energy?
Well, I guess the right amount of energy is the amount of energy that's conducive to the least amount of suffering that you suffer. So, for example, if
now
you
remember, Peter, that the parami is about helping others.
Right. Well, for example, look, with a state of mind like ill will arising, I would be using the parami of energy to restrain.
No, you don't. No, with the
All right.
greatest respect.
No, it's all right.
It's like, okay, so let's go back to what I was saying about there being different facets of the parami in a particular performance of a particular activity. So, for instance, let's just say somebody needs to be driven to the hospital. Okay, what is the energy aspect of that? Please don't say putting petrol in your car.
No, it's I don't know. It's expending generosity, a type of energy. I don't know. It's running compassion, a certain amount of energy in that situation, or
I know it's expending physical and mental energy on behalf of somebody else.
right. Oh, okay, right.
Yeah,
Simple as that.
it's putting your own, like, say for instance, it's like it's 9:30 in the evening, and it becomes apparent that somebody needs taking to the hospital, and you just like settled in for the evening, and it's like, well, I could offer to help. Yeah, what is the energy? The energy is going, yeah, despite the fact that I'm just got into comfort mode for the evening, I'm going to abandon that, and I'm going to go into the discomfort of raising my energy, offering to take the person, and then going and taking them, and perhaps having to stay at the hospital for a few hours while they get seen to. Yeah, that's the parami of energy.
Right.
You see what I mean?
Yeah.
Emma, nice to see you. You got your hand up as well. Oh, you need to unmute.
Yeah, so I was just thinking, whenever talk about that sort of balance between kind of thinking for yourself and what's going to be the right thing here, around energy. I mean, I was always brought up with this kind of, I was brought up with the idea of Mother Teresa, and I think there was something that was kind of taught to me as a young girl that I still have in my head, that she said something that when she was asked about God or something, she was always kind of like, God asks a lot of me. And I think I'm using that as a kind of a way of trying to, that we should be completely selfless until, and until we're exhausted, because that's how she was. That was an example she gave. And then I've been taught now that there is more of a balance to life. Am I getting this, that we should sometimes withdraw our energy and our giving?
Yes, because to put it in the Buddha's words, we're talking about mere morality, right? We're talking about living a good life, being good people. And for some people, that is the extent of the spiritual life. Yeah. And so the total expenditure of energy on behalf of others would seem like a good idea. But if you realize that actually freedom from suffering can only in the end come from an investigation and exploration of that you have to do personally of the true nature of reality. So you have to explore the true nature of reality in order to undo the ignoring that causes us to misperceive reality, want things to be different than they are, and consequently suffer. So to get off that endless wheel of what we call samsara, there has to be this meditative exploration. And if you have exhausted all your energies, all your spiritual energies, just helping to prop other people up, you have not resolved their suffering, and you have not resolved your own. You've ameliorated somebody's suffering to a greater extent than would otherwise be the case, and that's laudable, but it's not morally or virtuously superior to leave yourself with no time for meditation, with no time for reflection and contemplation, and for gaining insight into the reality behind appearances. So you see what I mean? So that does, in the Buddhist scheme of things, it does require essentially putting a cap on it.
Yeah.
Because there's the appreciation underlying it that you cannot resolve the problem of suffering through external action alone. There has to be the willingness to do the work yourself. See what I mean?
Yeah. It is very hard. It's undoing my conditioning. It is sort of undoing that sort of conditioning, as the stories that I was told as a child and things like that, which is about how we should be in the world. It is just, you know,
You're allowed to change your mind.
yeah.
And for instance, there was a story, it wasn't a story, it was real, of an American couple, spiritual couple, who wanted to set up, it was a telephone hotline for people who were suffering so that they would get some help. And they poured all their effort and all their money into creating this hotline for people. It was failing, and so they remortgaged their house. It continued to fail, and in the end, they lost their house and became destitute. It's not the moral high ground to leave yourself with absolutely nothing, because you have been cruel. Essentially, you've been cruel to yourself, and so there is a middle way.
Yeah.
So we come back to that idea of the middle way.
Seems more of an intelligent approach to life than how I was brought up.
Yes, it's less idealistic.
Yeah.
It's more pragmatic.
Yeah.
It's more balanced, and I think more of an intelligent approach.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Okay.
there's the illustration of walking along the beach, and there's a shoal of starfish been marooned on the beach, but there are thousands of them. What are you going to do? Are you going to put them all back, or are you going to throw a few back as you go along? I added my own personal twist to that analogy by saying, well, if you had successfully put all the starfish back, and you've taken hours and hours and hours all day long putting all the starfish back, and then you continued with your walk and you'd gone around the next headland into the next bay, you'd have 5 beached sperm whales lying on the next beach going, okay. And the universe is going, okay, all right, you need to learn this lesson. Are you going to learn this lesson now or not? You know, we cannot, unfortunately, we just cannot save everyone.
Yeah.
So the development of the Parami and the Parami of energy is about finding, well, what is the right amount? What is it? It is right to go to the nth degree in certain situations. Absolutely it is, you know, but also people have got to learn their own lessons. And so I had a perfect example of this the other week. I was ill. I found out I had COVID on the Monday morning of a silent retreat. And I was unable to do any teaching that week. And so everyone who was on that retreat had to self-guide. And so it was like, there was part of me going, oh, I'm supposed to be there, I'm supposed to be helping. And another part of a little voice going, oh, that'll be right. You know, time for you to stop. Life is definitely telling you to stop at this moment. You're not doing anything. Just leave them. They'll be all right. Yeah. And so we have to know when not to as much as when to. And so there is a balance to be had.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Thanks, Emma. Either Lucy or Lynn.
Hi, Paul.
Lucy.
This talk of balancing energy just keeps reminding me of, obviously we all know that the paramis all kind of overlap, but it keeps reminding me of the generosity I don't know, teaching or idea of give what you can afford. Obviously, that doesn't necessarily mean kind of money or material possessions, but kind of what you can afford in energy as well, and time as well, depending on what other responsibilities you have. It's just exactly the same thing, basically. Balancing the energy of helping people and generosity, giving, not giving too much so that you kind of mess yourself up and can't then help yourself and help other people.
Exactly. And for me, that's part of impeccability. Yeah, it's so when you come on a retreat, we give a suggested amount for donation, but it's the wisdom part as well, because it's like knowing why it's good to give, like it's generous. I'm not paying for my retreat. I'm donating an amount of money to allow somebody else to go on retreat and gain the same benefit. I don't actually personally have enough money to give the recommended amount, so I will give what I can. And we've have existed for over 40 years doing retreats on that basis. So it works, because actions have results and generosity yields wealth, so and then at another stage in life, it might be possible for somebody to say, well, I'm flush now. That means I can afford to give a bit more. And so it's a movable feast. It's adjustable. So it's a part of the wisdom thing is to assess what's too much in this situation, as a for instance. And that's part of impeccability. I mean, it's the same with the way that we keep the gardens, we adjust. We have had to adjust over the years because there are fewer people to actually look after them. And so we have a different standard of impeccability, if you want, or, the state the garden is in. It's still good enough. It does the job. You still get a sense that you're in a harmonious, peaceful, tranquil environment. And so it's good enough. Yeah. And so with the Parami, that idea of what is good enough in this situation I think is really important and useful, especially when it comes to energy, because none of us have endless resources. And so you have to pick and choose a little bit. But good. Yeah, lovely observation, Lucy. Thank you. Okay. So we've looked a little bit at the energy Parami. What about the patience Parami? Surely this should be the hands should be flying up right now, surely. Why is patience a Parami? What has that got to do with being kind, being thoughtful, being generous, being of service to others? Jim?
Hi, Paul.
Yeah.
Simply that the world takes its own time and doesn't really care how much of a hurry I'm in or how much I want this or anything else. It's, sun comes when it wants to come. My partner, makes dinner when she's ready, not when I want it. My bus will come along when it's ready and things like that. There's no mental turmoil on my mind will make it any different. So why bother?
Okay, we have to remember again, we have to come back to this idea of context.
Mm-hmm.
So we are talking about in what way is practicing patience a Parami with regards to the people around you. How is it that you are being of service to them?
Well, patience involves understanding that their views are theirs, and even if I don't agree, letting them be.
Why?
Because trying to change them probably won't work.
Probably.
And may just create animosity.
It has been known in the human realm that differing views create animosity, definitely.
Yes. If I'm driving, yeah, drivers around me may not act exactly like I think drivers should, but still
Yeah.
they do. And me getting angry at them won't help at all. Sometimes you just gotta let them do the wrong thing.
So you don't have much of a choice.
Yeah. Yeah, the more you can understand that the people around you are their own people, that very rarely is there a chance to push my opinion in and try to make them change. And maybe I gotta be very, very careful about that, if at all. Most of the time it just means letting them be and letting them do their thing and letting them learn their lessons.
Okay, so being patient requires what?
The recognition that you want something and you're not getting it, that there might be discomfort, but you're not going to act on it.
Okay, what's another word for that discomfort related to the parami of patience? The discomfort, the not having things as you want them.
Well, that's craving. Craving for things to be different.
Okay, and in this instance, we could call that impatience. So the necessary requirement in order to accomplish the parami of patience is that you're impatient. It doesn't work otherwise. You've got to be impatient. There's got to be the quality of impatience, and then the willing sacrifice of the desire to get rid of that discomfort. And that is the service to the other driver or your partner or your, yeah. It's that back to this lovely paradox, which is in order to be patient, there has to be impatience and the willingness, yeah, as I say, not to act out of it. And that is a service to others, because I have it on good authority that human beings can be quite annoying sometimes. Even the little things, the little ticks.
Yeah, myself included. Sometimes I am the bad guy.
Yeah, me too.
All right, thanks.
Yeah, so exactly, it is that quality of, it's like, yeah, we can be annoying at times, and people can be frustrating, especially when you're trying to help them. Yeah, and so we do need to practice mindfulness in combination with the development of the parami, undoubtedly.
Sorry, a little analogy came up. I was at a estate sale where they sell the goods of somebody who's passed on or moved into a retirement home, and there was this really large chair that this woman had bought, and she started trying to take it up the stairs, and I offered to help her, and she said no. So she continued struggling to get up the stairs. Another man came along, and I think he just grabbed the other part of the chair, and they both went up the stairs together. And I sat there wondering, do I use more force or was I doing the right thing? Because I accepted her statement. No, she didn't need help, even though it really looked like she did. What the other guy did seemed just a tad too forceful, but that was my perception. Maybe I should have done the same thing.
That's an interesting observation. That is interesting. So he just came along and didn't even politely request, just grabbed it and, well, here we go.
Up we go, yeah.
That's very, very interesting. And yeah, again, I mean, that goes to show, I mean, it's, yeah. We don't know whether it was pre-planned. We don't know whether she said, well, I don't need your help. She was really saying no to you because she knew this guy was coming along, or it was just a guy out of the blue, just arrived. So we don't know. But that's interesting. It's like, is there something to be said? I don't know what you think about this. Is there something to be said for, there are moments when you just go in there and you correct the error without saying boo to a goose. Is that an expression? Anyway, you see what I mean. What do people think? Jim, what do you think? The point where you just go, no, this is what needs doing. We're doing that now.
In this particular case, I think I did the right thing. If she really wanted to struggle with this chair by herself, even though there was help offered, that was her choice.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But
no, I think there are occasions where you have to take it out of the individual's choice, especially when it comes to health matters. Sometimes a health condition can be such that the person perhaps doesn't even realize the severity of the situation that they're in, and you just have to act. And so I think that knowing your own mind again is like hugely important. What do other people think about that? Or have they got other examples of how that might be so? Les, hello.
Hello there. It could be a simple example that the offer was made. In her pride, she said no. And as she was struggling up the stairs further, she suddenly realised that maybe help was needed. And the gentleman come along just at that moment and was able to intervene and go up the stairs with her.
Okay, good. What do you think about this? This aspect which isn't coming from impatience, but is just aware perhaps that there needs to be an intervention irrespective of that person's wishes. You got any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think sometimes, but if you start thinking about should I and shouldn't I, you then end up questioning what you should be doing, and you get yourself into a right state actually trying to make a decision, by which time it's no longer a natural process. It's become a contrived action, and who knows what way you're going to go in that situation.
Yes, that's another very good observation, that we can dilly-dally and, we're so busy, just going through all the options that the moment has actually passed. Right, so it's not obvious. And I guess this is where trial and error and mistake making is an essential component. That, you have to take each case on its merits, I guess. Lynn, Lucy, what do you think?
Hi, Paul.
Hi.
I was just thinking of, say, when there's an elderly parent that continues to drive beyond when they should. I can remember that situation when my father was parking when he was driving off my mum to dropping her off at a care home and reversed into a plant pot. So, we got a call saying perhaps he shouldn't drive. I mean, in that case, my brother and I sort of talked about it, and it's a very difficult thing to do. And in that case, we didn't act, and everything was fine. But it could have been they could have died if something had happened, and they themselves, the person. So that's when you could act and just take responsibility for someone else.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because it's a thing that must be sort of on one's mind, like, it's getting to the point where I'm not sure that you can look after yourself now, but it's waiting for that incident that just takes it over the threshold, as it were. Not easy, because firstly, let's be honest, we don't want the hassle of it, and yet it's there. And you want people to have their freedom to be able to make the choices they want to make in their lives, and you don't want to impose. Yet at the same time, there is a moment when taking command of the situation, irrespective of the other person's wishes, is the right thing to do. Jane, hello. Oh, you need to unmute there. You need to unmute, Jane. Sorry.
Yes, I think there are times when you've to act in someone's best interests, and although you've said you can't sort of think about what the other person might feel, there are definitely times, I mean, if somebody is a danger to themselves or something like that, it's a matter of degree, isn't it? And we have a responsibility to think about the consequences, not just for that person, but for the other people around them. And if we think somebody, say, hasn't got mental capacity to assess risk, then we would have to perhaps act against their express interest. Although it obviously it's a sliding scale, and in most cases you'd be wanting to abide by what that person's expressed wishes. So
do you think maybe that's the heart of the Parami, is that we've undertaken that reflection, and that we've been willing to look at all these different aspects, that we're willing to do that we're willing to, because we have got that person's best interests at heart.
So I would think so. I mean, obviously, somebody who's always bustling in and thinks they know best for other people, that I mean, going back to the wisdom, that isn't wise action. But to leave somebody at risk, and where, as far as you can see, and you've assessed it sort of objectively, that in terms of going back to the wisdom aspect, that wouldn't be wise action either. I mean, I don't think these decisions are easy, and it's as I say, a matter of on a sliding scale. You can't make assumptions, but you can't always stand back either.
Yeah, you have to make an assessment on the balance of all these various painful feelings, the painful feeling of the person concerned, your own painful feelings, the painful feelings of the people around you. It's like it's making an assessment, assessing the situation, and then we have to be prepared. This goes back to this thing of vacillating between different options. It's like at some point we just have to go, all right, I act, and I think an essential part is just saying, okay, I accept that my actions have results to the best of my ability. I don't think I'm acting out of impatience. I don't think I'm acting out of just trying to get rid of the problem. I don't think I'm acting out of greed or the desire to control or anything like that. I genuinely have this person's best interests at heart, and this is what we're going to do. And you just accept responsibility.
Yes, and sometimes you have to allow people to take risks. I mean, when you think about bringing up children, if you always try to keep them safe, they're not going to learn and grow and decide when it's sensible to take a calculated risk. So sometimes you do have to stand back, even if you are concerned about the situation. So I think it required a lot of reflection sometimes.
Yeah. Danger is going to find us no matter what.
Yes.
And you've got to bring people up to be danger savvy, to have having experienced a degree of it. I was recently recounting a time when I almost drowned off the coast of India because I was being particularly foolish. And boy, I learned my lesson. You have to face a certain amount of danger in life in order to understand that it is danger.
And develop, yeah.
Exactly. Thanks, Jane. Thanks for that. All right, who is next? Ellen. Hello.
Hi, Paul. The only aspect I might add to what we've been talking about is, and again, having had experience with elders, this is very much what I'm relating to in this conversation, that I can feel more settled sometimes in not intervening when I remind myself that the other person has life lessons to learn in this life. And if it's entirely possible, the right choice is to just let them be, and for them to have to figure it out on their own, even if they are going to fall down and hurt themselves very commonly what happens with the elderly. It's like, fine, you just have to stay on your own. Someday you're going to fall or whatever. And then we're in an emergency situation, and then that forces their hand. But I'm appreciating in some of the stories how there a lot of thinking. If there's a red line about, are other people going to be affected by someone who can't drive, for example?
Yeah. There are so many different ways of looking at it, aren't there? And so I think it does come back to know your own mind, know where you're coming from. And I mean, are you just trying to hide the suffering of old age from your own sight? You know, these sorts of things. Do you genuinely have that person's best interest at heart? And then you act, and you just own your action and the results that come. Perhaps also with the reflection that one day it will be us, and somebody else will be making those decisions on our behalf.
Right.
I don't know why I'm laughing quite so uproariously at that, but thanks, Ellen. Keith.
Hello, Paul.
Hi, Keith. Nice to see you.
I often experience in life that people don't always say what they mean. And so you can't always necessarily just follow their words. Pardon?
Especially English people, British people.
Yeah, yes. We're all so polite, aren't we?
I'm very well. My arm's falling off.
Yeah,
exactly. Fine, thank you. Sorry, do carry.
And I think particularly with partners, you know, when clearly they're very, very tired, but they sort of carry on saying, yes, I will do dinner or whatever. And really what they're saying is, could you do dinner this evening because I'm too exhausted?
Right.
So it's always the opposite of what they're saying.
Yes.
So
hopefully, if you're a caring partner, you learn through trial and error, but you start to learn about these subtle communications, and you're able to begin, hopefully you're able to begin to recognize perhaps what they mean. Yeah, so I think that's a part of the parami. Which parami would it be? But that willingness, perhaps it's patience. An aspect of it is patience, perhaps, where you're just willing. Yeah, it's so essentially it's us adapting to the partner, as it were. It's me adapting to the partner in the sense of saying, well, that doesn't make sense, but that's what he or she says, so that's the way that she puts it. Okay, I'll look out for that. I'll look out for that pattern of behavior moving forward, perhaps. It can be difficult. We don't always say what we mean. You're right. So again, the patience aspect would be like not blowing a gasket because it turns out that the person wanted the absolute opposite of what they said. But it also needs the wisdom aspect to learn from patterns. That's something I'm very keen on, is like the impatience. You see something that's not right, something's out of kilter, and there's a strong impulse to act on that single experience, whatever it might be. When in actual fact, if you practice patience, you take the step back and say, I'm going to wait until there is a discernible pattern of behavior and deal with the pattern of behavior rather than single instances, because then you are helicopter parenting, or then you are controlling, then you are manipulating. Yeah, but if you wait until there is a sufficient evidence of a pattern of behavior, then you can deal with that more easily, I think. Seems to me. Okay, so we've got 2 weeks to go off and do that then. Are people finding it easy to find opportunities? I mean, I feel that it seems to me anyway that life presents us with plenty of opportunities, but let's see over the next couple of weeks. See if we can bring more awareness and more mindfulness to these opportunities as they emerge. And remember, it's not some idealistic flag waving of your virtue. It's just the little things of being there for others, of perhaps, being aware of what they're saying and what they perhaps mean underlying what they're actually saying a little bit more. Just being patient with people. Recognizing when there's too much, where that desire to drain yourself completely of all your energy, where that might be coming from, and whether there's something that you need to adjust there. And perhaps be more willing to accept that other people are inevitably going to suffer and that there's no possibility of you really saving them all. And that suffering is inherent to realizing freedom from suffering. You cannot realize freedom of suffering if there's no willingness to experience suffering. We have to experience suffering, and through experiencing the suffering, see where the craving is. And it's the craving for things to be different that is abandoned. So sorrow is our guru. It's how we learn. Okay, so let's leave it there for this evening. Lovely to see you all. And we'll meet up again in a couple of weeks and see how you got on.
Thanks very much, Paul.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Paul.
Paul.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.